remembering inherently very memorable events, unusual events that would have impressed themselves on the memory, events of key significance for those who remembered them, landmark or life-changing events for them in many cases, and their memories would have been reinforced and stabilized by frequent rehearsal, beginning very soon after the event. We may conclude that memories of eyewitnesses of the history of Jesus score highly by the criteria for likely reliability that have been established by the psychological study of recollected memory, end quote. The reasons for interacting with Borkham are basically twofold. First, he makes the clearest claim that, quote, the psychological study of recollected memory, end quote, helps to establish the historical reliability of Jesus traditions. That is, he believes the fundamental question of historical Jesus research, namely whether a saying or deed can be attributed to the earthly activities of Jesus, is resolved through appeal to modern study of memory theory. Unambiguously, Borkham understands what is at stake at the heart of historical Jesus research, and he asserts that memory is an important breakthrough in establishing the historical reliability of gospel traditions. The second reason for focusing on Borkham revolves around the impact of his work. Borkham is a senior and deservedly much respected scholar. Not only is his work widely cited, but in some circles it is seen as a major advance in historical Jesus studies. And as has been stated, the Eyewitnesses book has received various laureations. Notwithstanding such praise, my contention is that the application of memory studies to the Jesus tradition in the manner undertaken by Borkham is a major methodological misjudgment, and moreover the conclusions he draws do not any way follow from the misapplication of the psychological study of memory. In a way, I feel that interacting with such a senior scholar who claims to offer a major development in historical Jesus studies requires no justification. However, I am driven to make such a defense in the face of a criticism on Professor Keith's blog. In response to my hopefully constructive critique of Borkham, Keith wrote on his blog, "Foster ignores scholars such as me, Rafael Rodriguez, Anthony Ledon et al., who employ social memory and conclude against the historicity of various traditions." The simple response to this is that I did not cite Professor Keith because I did not have disagreement with his work. He is not making the claims that Borkham makes regarding the historical reliability of memory. As I've tried to show, Borkham is a central and highly esteemed figure, making arguments about historical Jesus research. My article was published in the Journal for the Study of the Historical Jesus, and hence, unsurprisingly, it focused on historical Jesus issues. Why would I distract from the main point of my argument, which was only a third of the article, by bringing in extraneous material? I realize at this point I must apologize for being old school, but I was taught to stick with the point one is making and not to have pretentious footnotes to show how much one knows. Thus, in my article, the footnotes are present only to support the central thesis. Furthermore, I know that I personally do not occupy the same rank in our discipline as Professor Borkham, so I would not expect future works necessarily to reference my article. Admittedly, I am thrilled when my work is cited, but maybe non-citation is a truer reflection of impact, and thus I hope I'm not so fragile or thin-skinned that when my work is not cited, that I take it as a personal affront. Rather, it probably shows that my writing did not speak to the question being addressed, or, especially in relation to my own work, that it was not of sufficient substance to warrant interaction. Those caveats aside concerning the nature of the response on certain blog sites, let me restate succinctly my argument concerning the place of social memory theory in relation to historical Jesus research. First, I set out two predominant formulations of social memory theory, not from within the discipline of New Testament studies, but by drawing upon the literature within the scholarly field of psychology, where such memory theory arose and continues to be developed. The first theory discussed is the presentist model. It argues that social memory becomes social fact as it is remade to serve contemporary values and needs. Hence, memory is reconstructed in different ways as it is invoked in a variety of groups. Therefore, notable features, according to the presentist model, is that memory becomes context-dependent. The second theory, which does not hold the same theory following as the presentist model, is the cultural system model. In distinction from the presentist model, it views social memory as having some degree of alignment with past events. Nonetheless, the relationship between past and present remains far from unproblematic. On this model, the kernel of historical reality that may be embedded in politically overlaid social memory has been remolded in order to communicate contemporary beliefs. Therefore, neither model gives simple, let alone pristine, access to reliable historical recollection. Moreover, community or social memories are reconceptualizations of the past that reinscribe such recollections in a form that makes them useful vehicles for carrying the communal function of establishing permanence, stability, and duration, coupled with a sense of rootedness that allows for the individual to construct a sense of belonging and connectedness. I'm going to move on to an example, a contemporary example. We asked for blood in this session, so I'm going to look at the Eucharist here. This can be illustrated by consideration of a contemporary Eucharistic practice. The breaking of bread and the sharing of wine. That was for Catholics here. For Protestants, obviously, there's no blood involved. I hasten that. The breaking of bread and the sharing of wine are events not of historical reenactment, but done in memorial of the one who presided at the primordial meal. Both the form of the liturgical act and the words used are historically removed from what may have happened when Jesus and his disciples shared what may have been some kind of Passover meal. Despite the distance between the original event and modern masses, Eucharists, communion services, or Lord's Supper, the claim of a historical connection is a powerful device for legitimating the contemporary ceremony. The rhetoric is that, as the Lord Jesus Christ did on the night he was betrayed, so those in believing communities continue to do now. If it were possible to play the video of that initial first century meal alongside a modern Eucharistic celebration in some kind of elaborate spot the difference game, I'm certain the differences column would be very full, whereas the similarities column would be very empty. Obviously, there is a difference between the case of comparing contemporary Eucharistic practice to the hypothetical form of the foundational event and trying to determine which gospel traditions might have a strong possibility of stemming from the earthly Jesus. However, I believe heuristically it is useful. It shows that commemorated or memorialized events function to serve contemporary communal needs rather than as unpolluted repositories of documentary history. In fairness, I know that Chris Keith and Rafael Rodriguez believe precisely that. Their works carefully trace the need and the way early memories in Jesus communities have been formulated to serve those needs. Rodriguez in particular discusses this very phenomenon in his monograph under the substantial section Expressions of the Past as Phenomena in the Present. The critique of memory theory undertaken here, as in my previous discussion, remains the same as I stated previously. It is not a rejection of memory studies per se, but a rebuttal of the application of those insights as taken over from psychological studies and uncritically applied to validate vast swathes of Jesus tradition as being historically reliable. Such acts of validation are usually claimed en masse, rather than working through specific pericope. As an aside from one who works on the non-canonical Gospels, if it were the case that social memory theory established the historicity of the canonical Gospel traditions to the extent proposed by Borkham, then it is difficult to accept his grounds for rejecting those traditions contained in the non-canonical Gospels. For instance, while the Gospel of Peter meets Borkham's own indicator of reliability by preserving the name of a minor character when a centurion who witnesses the resurrection is named as Petronius, instead of this becoming an indicator of historical reliability, Borkham invokes a different set of criteria. His argument devolves into traditional discussions of dating, source dependency, to show that this memory is neither early nor independent. I agree with Borkham's assessment in this case, but simply wonder why the same principles are not used to assess traditions in the canonical text. Or was I just forgetting that the four Gospels of the New Testament are canonical and hence sacred and must be found to be historically reliable? To conclude, my argument is not that memory studies are to the Jesus tradition what homeopathy is to modern medicine. Quite the opposite. I think memory studies can offer much for understanding both the transmission and development of gospel traditions. In many ways, mutatis mutandis, memory studies perhaps bring fresh methodological resources to address similar questions to those discussed by both form critics as well as those interested in the early reception of the text. While I remain largely committed to standard methods for assessing historical Jesus questions, this is not some intransigent commitment to those methods for their own sake. If a new methodology is developed that provides a better mechanism for determining the historical reliability of Jesus traditions, then I would be delighted to see that occur. In the meantime, we have what we have. The results that the traditional methods offer are meager, and we would wish for more than is verifiable. The danger is that we allow the desire for more to dissolve our methodological rigor, which is essential for genuine historical Jesus research. As scholars, that is a desire I believe we must resist, both individually and collectively, in meetings such as this. Thank you.
Okay, we have quite a bit of time for questions, but I thought we could have, if people wanted to respond individually in the order, I'll give them 2 minutes each or something like that. Is that okay? Chris?
Thanks again to my colleagues here. This has been very enlightening for me, and I've appreciated the opportunity to be a part of it. To Zeb's, and I should say straight out, I agree entirely with Zeb and with Paul that social memory theory does not affirm the historical authenticity of the Gospels. I also think that the theory itself does not affirm the historical inauthenticity of the Gospels. The theory, as theory, does neither one. It just gives us a means to have the conversation. So in my opinion, these presentations in many ways reiterated my point that I honestly think this entire discussion is off track. But I think it's interesting that in Zeb's article, he makes the point that that memory can be reliable and it can be unreliable, and that's entirely right. But then he concludes here that that we can't have the historical Jesus discussion because of this issue, reliable versus unreliable.